This is Amelia, and you're listening to Fifth Period. Excellent.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Fifth Period, the film podcast hosted by two media teachers, where this week we are hopping into our phone booth time machine and collecting a bunch of famous podcasters throughout history to help us make this episode extra special. My name is Mr. Brown and with me as always is...
Mr. Whittle Esquire, and together we are...
The Fifth Period!
Very, very excited today, people. My energy levels, the caffeine that I'm holding in my hand probably helps, but we're ticking a box here today. This is a very, very important film for me, and very excited to be talking about it today.
Yeah, I'm still recovering from a very wordy intro today.
From yourself?
From myself.
Right.
I don't know why I do this to myself. I write these intros. I can make them as simple as I want.
Yes.
On top of jamming out to Bill and Ted's, we will also be doing our regular Student Appreciation Weekly Watches and Tantalising Trailers segments. So if you want to skip ahead to anything, I will leave time codes in the description below.
Excellent.
Nice. Our student appreciation today goes out to Amelia. The choice of film this week was not hers, but it may as well been because this is one of her absolute favorites. In fact, we had a few false promises with when we were going to show this one, so I was very pleased we were able to get it on board before the end of the year, before Amelia finished up too. I didn't have the pleasure of teaching Amelia this year, but worked very, very closely with her for our school production, and it was an absolute delight. She is extremely talented. Her singing would put Beethoven's musical abilities in this film to shame, but also she's just a lovely human. So thank you very much for contributing, Amelia.
Her advocacy for us getting this film into Film Club was strong over the last few weeks.
Oh, yes.
Very, very pleased that it finally happened. Like Amelia, I hold this film very close to my heart. So both of us are very happy for it to be there. And Amelia's introduction clearly shows how much of a fan she is.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it so much. I'm just remembering when it happened. Riley was in the space with us, and he, of course, had to then challenge Amelia. He thought his guitar playing skills were superior.
Does Riley even know the film?
I don't know that he did.
But he gave it a red hot go.
Yeah.
Maybe kapow.
I think he did do something like
wait,
that. I feel like he did like an air kick or something. So that sounds like Riley, right?
Yeah. Anyway, digressions. Thanks, Amelia.
Thanks. Now, before we jump in, I was telling you that watching this through reminded me when I was in primary school, a drama teacher of mine completely ripped off this idea for our school play. And I didn't even realize it until I was watching it on this most recent screening. But essentially, my school show when I was in primary school was about two people who were competing in a talent competition, and they went through time and visited a bunch of famous musicians and got advice on how to do their talent show. So very, very similar.
Would you now want to go back in time and revisit that with the knowledge of it being a reference to the film?
I don't know if it would have altered my performance.
Oh, so you were in the...
I played, believe this, I played Elvis Presley.
Nice.
Yeah, George would love it.
It's locked. So a bit of a nostalgia jump for me on this one. This film came out in 89, but it's of an era, generally speaking, that's very important and pivotal to me. I was watching this when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, and that turn of the decade culturally shifted a lot of things. Metal going into grunge, so the music kind of element to it and all the fashion that went alongside that musical shift. And that's really present in this film and also the sequel as well. So watching it back, I'm like, oh, this film was important in more ways than one for me. There's a few films like that. Wayne's World's another one for me. Yeah, so I liked revisiting it with that kind of looking back to its influence on me as an individual as well. People have these films.
Would you want this fashion to return?
No, one would argue a lot of it just sticks around as well. Like, bit of flannel over the top of a band t-shirt wearing jeans has been around since the 70s and the 60s.
That's true. Maddie said to me though, how come guys don't wear midriff tops anymore? Yeah. Because it looks ridiculous.
Yes. There are some more extreme elements to the fashion of that time for sure.
But before we get to that time, we start the film in 2688.
Yes. with opening credit sequence with music from the band Big Pig, which is a Sydney band. This was like their biggest hit. They did a cover of Breakaway, which was like an old 70s kind of half a hit that they then took and made into their own 80s more industrial poppy vibe. But yeah, like the film opens with this song, and that music was very much psychological kind of trigger of, this film. Yeah. Like, you know, when the music becomes so deeply ensconced in your memory of it. So when you hear the song.
Good use of ensconced, too.
Yeah.
It always makes me think of when George wants to be ensconced in velvet.
I love that apartment. It's so cozy. I'm ensconced in velvet. You know, if it was socially acceptable.
I know you would drape yourself in velvet.
Nice.
Got to get in early with the Sci-fi references.
I'm sure there'll be more to come.
You wanted to be ensconced in velvet. You're buried.
Welcome to the future. It's great. And I like that their measure of how great the future is that bowling scores are way up and mini golf scores are way down.
So this opening monologue is from the character Rufus, played by George Carlin.
Yeah.
Who we've spoken about on a previous podcast, Cars 2. Because,
Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. He voiced one of the characters in Cars 1, but didn't get to return for Cars 2 because he died. He dead. But this monologue was actually filmed after most of the principal photography occurred, because through post kind of realized the way they were narratively getting the story across wasn't working for them. So they added this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because we were talking about with Spaceballs about the crawl and lazy exposition. But I feel like because of the joke that they're making at the start of this, it didn't feel too forced for me.
No, they also brought in those punchy little kind of references, like that make it a bit fun. Like you said, bowling scores are way up.
Yeah.
The year 2688, so neatly 700 years after where this film is set in 1988.
It's all pretty vague, and even by the end of the film, it's pretty vague. But we find out that Bill and Ted are responsible for how well civilization is doing just through their music, I guess. Their music is very important to the way things have turned out. But in order for everything to work out that way, they need some assistance. And we don't quite understand why, but quickly find out that it's because their friendship is on the verge of ending if Ted gets transported away to... Well, is it like a military camp? What kind of a...
Yeah, it's military school with Colonel Oates. Yep.
Did you think it was interesting in the history class? They make it a really big deal that these guys don't know who Joan of Arc is or who Napoleon is. I don't reckon a lot of kids at our school would know who they were.
No, I mean, obviously knowing these characters becomes more important for this film in particular. And like having just some pop quiz on random names isn't how modern classrooms work. Usually you work more on focusing on a particular era and particular characters within that era. So you wouldn't have a final speech that is about Joan of Arc, but also Abraham Lincoln. And
it's so vague.
Yeah. Did you notice the cheap wipes that they did when they went from like Bill and Ted in their garage to the school? Like a reference to what we were talking about last week with Spaceballs, how they did the cheesy wipes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few of those in this film as
Okay,
well.
I didn't notice it. No, I must have been so distracted by their amazing musical abilities.
Yes.
That they have to combine with a triumphant video.
So how would you describe these two characters of Bill and Ted? What culture are they kind of part of, or subculture?
Well, it's kind of like the surfer dude culture, right?
This is the point I'm trying to make. Like, they're a bit of a mishmash, right? Like, San Dimas, the place that this film kind of is set in, is Southern California. So they do have that Cali surfer, whoa, dude kind of stuff. The Californians. But they're also a big metal fan. So they do have, and this is like the tail end of the 80s, which like metal had its real prime in the 80s. So they are tied in with that as well. So there's a bit of a cross culture that goes on with these two characters. They are stoner-ish, but they're never represented as stoners. The characters are built to appeal to a variety of subcultures, which I thought worked well.
Yeah. Well, it makes you want to root for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we find out that they need an A+ on their final history report. Otherwise, they will fail the class, which as a result, Ted will then flunk out of school entirely. And so that's why his dad wants to send him to the military academy.
I love both characters and both actors who portray the characters. So Bill S. Preston Esquire is played by Alex Winters, whereas Ted Theodore Logan is a very young, at this stage at least, Keanu Reeves, who had only been in a few features prior to this.
Yeah, I would also say that he has never been able to shake the reputation of his character from this film.
Well, he's doing...
Whenever anyone refers to Keanu Reeves, they always do the whoa.
Yeah. The whoa that they now do is more from The Matrix. Whoa. But this is a meta whoa, if you want. What I liked most about Keanu Reeves' performance in this is his dazed and confused look.
Yes.
Like, he does it so well when something stumps him or, is confronting to him, that look on his face of, whoa. It's a whoa look, yeah? Yeah, so I really like that throughout the film.
It skips ahead again back to the future. What did you think of their outfits in the future? You got the futuristic robes, but then they all wear the glasses as well.
I love how a movie like this, and it happens commonly in movies where a depiction of what is in the future will actually ironically date the film that's representing that future, because you see, like, this is a late 80s representation of the future. If you then watch Bogus Journey, the sequel to Excellent Adventure, which was made 2 years later, their representation of the future is a little bit different. It's modernized. They obviously also had a bigger budget to play with, but it still very much looks from an early 90s representation of the future. So we always can see the era of the film through how they represent the future, which is fun. I like that in its own right. Like, thin glasses are represented in Star Trek Next Generation. Like, there's that one character that wears those. So there's all that tie-in there. We haven't talked about it yet, but what do you think about this film being influenced by the whole future time jumping and Back to the Future?
There's some pretty clear references to Back to the Future in it. Whenever the phone booth travels, you get that flame line around the bottom of it.
There's quite a bit in this film that I'm like, this film certainly was influenced by Back to the Future.
Oh, of course, though.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't you capitalize on the popularity of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, the phone booth itself is a nice Doctor Who nod.
Yes.
The fact that they're traveling around in a phone booth.
Yep.
There's lots of references. They know who their audience is in order to have lots of fun little gags in it as well.
Yep.
Also, I think that there's some really clever hidden details in the film as well. So we're introduced to Bill's stepmom.
Missy?
Yes, who right at the end of the film, Bill confesses he does have an Oedipus complex.
Well, like, even at the start, like...
it's clear to us, but he admits it himself at the end.
Because we first meet Missy when she picks him up after school, right? And Ted mentions, remember when I asked your mum out to the prom? Shut up, Ted. So he was like, I tried to work it out, because you know how American high schools has all those names for what year level you're in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he was like what's the one of like a year 7 or 8? Freshman. And she was like senior. So there's about 5 years difference between them.
I completely missed that game.
Yeah, so I was trying to work out, like, because it's pretty interesting, the relationship dynamic that then they find themselves in, where she's now Bill's stepmom.
Yeah.
And assumedly Bill's dad, if Bill himself is like 17, Bill's dad is like 35 to 40. Dating a 22-year-old?
Yeah.
Well, married to a 22-year-old? Yeah. But it's 89, right? We had, this is not the first time on the podcast we've talked about weird year amounts between characters.
Oh, certainly not. In terms of the hidden details, the time that she comes into the bedroom while they're working on the history project, there's a neon sign behind her, and she obscures one of the words, but the word that is clearly visible sitting above her head is hot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, nice.
So it's just like fun little production design details there.
We then move from that scene into Ted goes back to his house to get something, and we meet Ted's dad, who is played by Hal Landon Jr. In this film, at least, we only get to refer to him as Captain Logan, because he's also the police captain.
Yep.
He is a great character actor. I love him. I would argue he's one of my favorites in the film.
Right.
He just represents that firm, stereotypical dad really well. I really like him a lot.
He's good at playing a jerk in this.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines in the whole film was when they're talking about Marco Polo, And he goes, I knew it wasn't just a water sport.
It's actually quite a clever script in many ways. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can forget that when a lot of the comedy is quite silly.
Yes.
You can forget that it's a cleverly made film.
One of my favourite lines is when they're at the front of the Circle K food stop, when the booth comes down with Rufus in it, Ted goes to Bill, strange things are afoot at the Circle K. And like, just like, so good. I love it. Yeah, anyway.
The visual effects in the film. So you talking about the phone booth coming down. At that moment, I was like, I'm getting a real Ghostbusters vibe about it. Like, they look really, really similar in the way that they were done.
Yeah, even though we're talking 7-8 years between production time for those two films, I agree. Like, the way they used, they get the electric overlay, it's very similar to the proton packs, the rays, yeah?
It looks great, though.
Yes.
Like, I love these kinds of effects.
Yep.
Yeah, very, very well done. But yes, as you said, Rufus turns up. He's not convincing enough on his own, but luckily, future Bill and Ted arrive to convince them to go back in time.
But they're unsure whether, like, you know, they really are themselves, so they
have to test each other.
Yeah, they ask what number they're thinking of, right?
Yeah, and what number are they thinking of, Mr. Whittle?
69, dudes. Because I hadn't watched it for so long, you can cut this out if you want.
No.
Because I hadn't watched it for so long, and you know my silliness of using that number intermittently whenever there's a number needed for someone.
Of course.
I'd forgotten that this is probably the premise of me finding that number humorous. Like, and before I even knew remotely what it was referencing, it was just Bill and Ted was saying it, so therefore it was funny. Like, so I think that really influenced me for, like, as a 41-year-old still finding that number funny.
Yeah. Oh. I mean, each to their own, right? That was most unprecedented, Rufus.
What we also need to remember is that this was the same time that Ninja Turtles hit.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so the original Ninja Turtles. And so this whole Cali language of bodacious and cowabunga and radical was like really coming to the fore. And this film, I felt they were trying to grab particular words from the English language and make them into the zeitgeist of popular culture.
Right.
So saying something's heinous or unprecedented.
Unprecedented,
yeah. Like that kind of stuff. Like they were wanting to kind of, not trademark, but like implement their own vocab as well as like use existing. It was, fun.
They commenced their journey with a trip to Austria in 1805, and they aren't there very long. They literally appear there and then leave again, and only accidentally pick up Napoleon. So I'm not sure if that was just a way for Rufus to show them how the time machine worked.
So I said before that Captain Logan's my favourite character, maybe. Incorrect.
Napoleon's your favourite character?
There's a couple of scenes that come up where Napoleon wins for me. Like
he doesn't even get to go on the excellent adventure with them, though.
But that's what makes it funny, because of the stuff he does in
while he's
1988.
there.
Anyway, we'll get to that. It wasn't this one. It was when they go to medieval England that I started thinking about how this film had a very limited budget, original story, and like the writers and the developers were unproven to the studios. There's a whole backstory of how it jumped a few studios, but the production value in it is pretty good. Like, we talked about the effects.
If they had a minimal budget, they must have been utilizing existing sets and things like that.
Because especially when they go to the medieval England and they're using the armor, and then there's that whole chase scene that happens with the cart and stuff like that. And they must be using existing lots. They have those set up.
They're the kinds of things that you would expect to see a medieval castle on a lot right next to like the Western Saloon.
Yeah. And like, I love when you find out it's the same castle that was used in this film and this film and this film. Yeah.
So they accidentally pick up Napoleon, but this is the only time that the machine accidentally picks someone up. Later on, the guy's even swinging at it in the medieval times right next to it, and he doesn't get taken along for the ride.
Yeah, Napoleon...
He gets sucked in from across the battlefield.
Isn't he holding on to something?
No, he literally gets like pulled across from ages away.
Oh, right. I love, like, prior to that, like, because they're translating his French.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, he's giving instructions to all his army, and one of them is blow them up. like, I love that would be what Napoleon would literally say. He's like, blow them up. Like, it's very funny.
Now, Rufus explains to them, when he gives them the instructions on how the time machine works, he explains to them that they need to make sure that they're using the watch to keep track of what the real time is that they're traveling
Yes,
back to.
because Ted's watch will be the only one that keeps the true time. And they need to know, because what the stakes are set up to be is that they need to make their history presentation on time. Yeah? Yeah.
But they have a time machine. They can travel back whenever they want.
They eventually realize that they can do that and use that to their advantage, but it takes them quite a while.
But, like, you know when they arrive and see themselves again at the end of the film? They could have just stayed in that time period and then they'd have the whole night to work on their project.
Yeah, and even if they're too ditzy to kind of work it out, you think Rufus would give them the kind of, hey, by the way, whatever you want to be, just you can be there. I love that they have to use like a yellow pages to work.
The yellow pages is great. When you actually see the visuals of them flipping through the different decades.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. They take Napoleon inside, leave him with Ted's brother,
Yes.
and then decide that they're going to go and pick up a bunch of famous people from history that they can then use to help inform their history report. Good casting for Ted's brother. They actually looked identical.
Yeah, I didn't look into that. Like that kid is really on point with just looking like Keanu.
He's got some funny moments later on when he's like, you ditched Napoleon. He's like, he's a dick.
Yeah. Yep.
Again, we get another sequence with Ted's dad, who's a jerk, and he's already made up his mind. It doesn't matter how he goes in the report. He's already going to send him to military academy. And so to get him out of the house, Bill has to call him from the payphone as Deputy Van Halen.
Yeah. Yes.
He manages to sneak him out, and then they head back to New Mexico, 1875. And we meet Billy the Kid.
Billy the Kid.
Yeah, a good gag about the phone booth landing between the outhouses as well.
Yeah.
That's very funny. I like how they are so authentically them in any time period they're in. They're just like, hey, old West dude, how's it going? They're introduced to Billy the Kid. He's famous, dude. Let's bag him. And they have to play cards with him first.
Yes.
I thought this was cool because once they get into the brawl in the saloon, they say, oh, we're totally weak. We can't possibly fight. And it was nice because it feels different to have leading characters that aren't super macho. And yeah, so it was cool to have them shy away from the fight.
Which is another thing that I think Back to the Future influences, like to have everyone kind of connected with Marty McFly. He became likable because he was a bit more everyday.
But Marty still fights. He gets into fights with Biff.
In a sense, yeah, like certainly contrasting to his father. Yeah, I see your point. I agree.
Yeah, I just liked it because if they are everyday, we connect more with them. They feel a little bit more grounded.
I also like that they go and get Billy the Kid first because Billy the Kid ends up helping them a lot. Like
he's so good.
He's on board for the adventure itself.
Yeah. So they take Billy the Kid with them to ancient Greece and they nab Socrates.
Socrates.
That
was my dad's favorite pun of the entire film. Bill and Ted are so naive that they call it Socrates. Call him Socrates.
Well, because he's trying to look him up in the book. He's trying to look up Socrates and he's like, oh, it's under Socrates.
What's even funnier is like back in the scene where the history teacher is trying to ask them what they know about history, whether they're ready for the test. Ted's reading the names off the board. He's like, we know all about Joan of Arc and Socratic method. Like he thinks that the name of the person is Socratic method. I love that. Yeah.
And so to connect with Socrates, he has to philosophize with him.
The days of our lives line.
Oh, so like good. Sands in the hourglass. So are the days of our lives.
And because Socrates had like said a line before they arrived that was very similar. We're just dust in the wind. He loved it. Like he's like, yes, you guys get it. Yeah.
No, it's actually Socrates that says the days of our lives line. Ted says the other one.
All we are is dust in the wind, dude. Dust? Wind. Dude.
From ancient Greece, they go to England in the 15th century. You can already see that both of the guys are in for the adventure. Billy, you're dealing with the oddity of time travel with the greatest of ease. And you see them throwing like the Nerf football behind them.
Yep.
They want to sneak into the castle because they see the princesses. And they dress in the knight's armor and they make the joke about heavy metal.
Yes.
So they start sword fighting and They pretend they're in Star Wars.
Yeah, they're like, there's not an explicit reference to Star Wars, but
But they're like,
I'm your father.
Yeah.
No, you're not. Yeah.
Sharky would have loved it.
Yes.
Hey, it's Sharky again. I love Star Wars.
Yeah, you do. Ted falls down the stairs and seemingly gets stabbed by the guards. This is when he gets heinous.
Yes.
But inexplicably, Ted fell out of his armor.
That's so good. Like, he rolled down the stairs, stayed in the armor for the full roll down of the stairs.
Yeah.
It's like a, what's it called?
Spiral staircase?
Spiral staircase. And then...
Somehow he fell out of the armor and no one saw him.
But the armor
get away.
stayed like it was a full human in place. Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't make any sense. But it gives us that fake out where we think that Ted might be killed. And he goes, "You killed Ted, you medieval dickweed." So they woo the princesses through song lyrics. Do you remember how the lyrics go?
Oh, you beautiful babes from England, for whom we have traveled through time. Will you go to the prom with us in San Dimas? We will have a most triumphant time. Way to go.
And they explain how that day they're supposed to get married to horrible old men. And the boys just go, "No way."
Oh, that's right. And then one of their fathers comes along, put them in the Iron Maiden. And then they think that's great because they're the Iron Maiden.
But yes, the Iron Maiden is, of course, the execution device where they're going to be beheaded. But fortunately, the executioners turn out to be Socrates and Billy.
Yep.
They all manage to escape.
We have a fun cart chase.
Yes, it is quite a fun cart chase.
Yeah.
But they can't dial the number for home, so Bill ends up picking a random one that just happens to get them to the exact future decade where the film starts.
Yes.
This is where I made the note. There's a guy standing right next to the phone booth and even makes contact with the phone booth and doesn't get sucked on the journey with them. Inconsistent. That's it. That one flaw, I hate.
Is that the only flaw that you like? I did think, I'm like, is Mr. Brown going to pick up on some kind of
No,
inconsistency?
the big issue I had with the time travel law was about the fact that
They felt like they had to get back
but for a certain time. If they'd watched Back to the Future, they would know that's not the case.
Wait a minute. I got all the time I want. I got a time machine. I can just go back early and warn him.
Everyone comes out and strums along to Bill and Ted. They do the exaggerated strumming action.
That's right. They go to the future where those three floating people are. Like,
This was the first time I noticed they were floating. I thought they were just sitting in chairs before.
I thought it was just a weird camera move that I was misled by when we first see them. But then when we go back to this scene, I'm like, oh no, they're meant to be kind of able to float while they're seated.
I didn't need it.
No, it just kind of distracted me a bit. But yeah, like all the other citizens of 2,688 come out and do the strum with them.
And they have to offer some words of wisdom.
Yes.
So, of course, they say, "Be excellent to each other
and
party on, dudes."
Yep.
Back in San Dimas, Napoleon is loving his ice cream, so much so that he gets crowned a Ziggy Piggy.
Ziggy Piggy. So the two people who bring the plate of ice cream out, label him a Ziggy Piggy, they're the writers of the film.
Ah, there you go.
So and they do
That's a fun
cameos
cameo.
in this one as well as Bogus Journey.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of fun.
Yeah, I like the ice cream parlor scene. I think I like the bowling scene more, though.
Bowling scene's my favourite.
Yeah.
And then Waterloo as well. But this is a great start because those three in sequence, it gives Napoleon a real character. Like, especially when they've finished the ice cream bowl and he like stops the girl from like having the last of the ice cream. Like, it's very much like, I'm a dictator. I get what I want. I'm going to have the last of the ice cream.
And it's the exact same thing with the bowling scenario where he keeps changing his score to be higher than theirs. That's the action that gets them to ditch him in the end.
Yes.
When he's changing the scores around.
And then like he throws the ball down the lane and then he slips and he's like, mad. And then he's just coming up, shit. I really like that. Yeah.
So we find out at this point that the phone booth is broken. When they find out...
Wait, sorry to interrupt, but before this happened, I'm pretty sure, because when they find out it's broken, they collectively have to help fix it, right? But they've picked up a few other people as well, because I just want to point out, my favourite is when they pick up Genghis Khan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they woo, like he's seen as slovenly, like eating all this meat and stuff. but then they bring him into the phone booth with the Twinkie. Like,
Yeah, so they realize that it's broken whilst they're traveling, and it starts off with them screaming out in like horror, but then it turns into as if they're on a ride. They're like, they're really enjoying it.
Yeah, and like the camera goes upside down to indicate that it's broken. Like,
because it's broken, every time they keep trying to get home, they end up in different time periods, and so they just keep picking up people.
so they
along
get
for the
Genghis
ride.
Khan, they get Joan of Arc,
Abraham Lincoln, Beethoven, and Freud.
And Freud, of course.
Which is great because obviously this is going to play into the whole stepmom thing.
There's a couple of good Freud jokes in the film, actually, once he's there.
I also like when they go to Joan of Arc, he reaches out his finger. It's like the Adam and God picture.
Yes, yep.
In prehistoric times, they all work together to try to fix the antenna.
Yes,
by chewing gum.
And also eating the little puddings. And the puddings, like the tins from the puddings, like become what they prop the antenna up with. I love it.
Instead of getting them back to the time that they are hoping for, they get back to San Dimas, but they end up there the night before, and this is when they see themselves.
Yes.
Oh, the conversation made way more sense this time. They realize that they have 2 hours left instead of 10 hours because Ted forgot to wind his watch. As I said, they had all the time in the world.
Yeah. So then they go to the mall?
Before they go to the mall, they have to get all of the historical figures to help them do their chores.
Oh,
they're not allowed to go anywhere.
Yeah. That's right. They go to they end up getting to the backyard. Missy is there. There's sodas in the fridge. Like, she just doesn't care that like these 8 random dudes are rocking up with her son. She doesn't let them leave without doing the chores.
Yeah.
So then you have the montage.
The montage, yes. When they do eventually go to the mall, they use the buddy system.
Yes.
They don't stick to the buddy system,
No,
though.
it's very, very, like, I love all the trouble that they each get into at the mall as well. But yeah, they go to the mall hoping to get Napoleon, but then they find out
He's not there, so they leave them at the mall
Yes.
and then go to the water park to meet him.
While they're at the water park, there is a great little joke where Socrates, Billy the Kid, and Freud try and approach a couple of girls in the food court, and Freud with the wiener dog on the stick, like the innuendo of like his stick slowly goes down as he's feeling less masculine. Very, very funny.
Yeah, so Joan of Arc checks out the aerobics, Beethoven checks out the electric keyboards,
Yes.
Genghis Khan checks out sporting wear, Lincoln gets his photo taken.
Oh, and then they want the costume back?
Yes. And yeah, Socrates and Billy the Kid are trying to wingman each other, but Freud gets in the way. At the water park, that was where I had the note about the montage. Because that is a great, with him pushing in front of all of the kids to try and go on the water slides, that is so much fun.
Like,
even his outfit.
So just to make a point of it, like the pun of the water park being called Waterloo as well, like so anyone who knows their historic references, that's something to do with Napoleon, his campaigns. I liked that little reference, but the joy that he is showing, like he's meant to be this great dictator, and then the way that they represent him in the film is like some giddy kid who's like going on their first ever water slide. It's so, and like a real pushy kid as well. Like you said, pushing in front of the other kids and stuff. I adore this part.
It's very, very good.
Yeah.
He's really good in it.
Yeah.
Like his physical comedy is great.
Yeah.
Everyone in the mall ends up getting arrested. And I like that when they're getting arrested, Freud asks the cop to tell him about his mother.
Yes.
And so they all head to the police station and plan to steal Ted's dad's keys, because they know if they plan to steal it in the future, then they're going to have it now because they'll send it back to themselves.
I love this sequence of the time play. Like,
I had forgotten all about this scene, and it's very, very clever. They just have to think they're going to do something, and then it's already done for them.
Yep.
Very, very cool. And so it happens a few times. There's the keys, there's the leaving the voice on the tape recorder.
I love how, like, because Ted's dad's slowly trying to find the voice, and, like, they decided on the recording that they'd recorded enough at the exact moment that he would reach the recording, like, because then they start talking about...
They run out of things. So
Yeah. So they start just promoting their band on the tape or something like that. It's very funny.
But they've also left themselves a note on the typewriter telling them to duck and wishing them luck for their presentation. And then finally, in the jail cell, he's like, remember... bin, and then the bin drops on his dad.
The bin's upside down, but the logo for Wild Stallions is painted the right way up.
But they do finally end up at the school. I don't know why their history reports are being presented in a massive auditorium instead of just in a class.
Something as a teacher now, like when that scene came up, I'm like, my year 11 English students freak out at the idea of presenting in front of their class to other 20 people. Imagine if you had to do your main sack, like presenting in front of the entire school, or at least, the entire of year 11 or whatever.
Well, also, it's a whole day that they're doing that. Yeah. That would get so boring by the end. So they go through each person and tell the audience how they like San Dimas now, which is, of course, the entire purpose. But this is a cool sequence. Like, I like each different perspective.
Yes.
They don't tell them in sequence. Again, it's about the third or fourth montage in the film. To make it more interesting, they go back and forth between them. So you see like Beethoven jamming out, but then it cuts to someone saying an inspirational line, and then it goes back to more music, and then it's well done.
Well, it kind of infers engagement with the audience as well. Like Bill and Ted are presenting well, because then there's cuts to the audience enjoying the presentation. So yeah.
I think Freud is my favorite though, how he just breaks down all of Ted's issues with his father. The presentation goes extremely well. As a result, they feel less fulfilled in what they're doing in life, so they decide to actually learn how to play guitar.
Yeah, I like that Ted kind of posits to Bill, it's like, we just got an A+, and like we time traveled, but we're back to being exactly the same. And then Rufus comes along as well.
With the princesses?
Yes, and more modern looking guitars as well.
Steinbergers.
Yep.
Oh, you know what? That's another Back to the Future reference. The intro to the film has them playing guitars and then they blow out the system. Like, that's how Back to the Future starts as well.
Oh, rock and roll.
But yes, anyway, so they finish by jamming out all together. Of course, they can't play. Rufus does like a face-melting solo and then turns to the audience, breaks the fourth wall and says, they get better.
And like anyone who's seen Bogus Journey, they do get better.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to revisit Bogus Journey.
I strongly recommend it. I think you'll enjoy it a lot. Because I watched both Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey back to back, and it made me remember, Bogus Journey is the one that I've watched triple the amount of times than Excellent Adventure. Love Excellent Adventure. Very much pivotal in my growing up, but Bogus Journey is where it's at. So, yeah, I want you to watch it.
Yeah, I think I will. Like, I'd forgotten a lot about this film. I always remembered liking it, but didn't remember loving it. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. So thank you, Ollie, for the recommendation. And thank you, Amelia, for campaigning hard for it as well. Should we move on to weekly watches?
Yep.
Weekly watches. Weekly watches. I love you.
So I've got 4 movies and 3 TV shows.
I have 6 movies, but I've kind of already talked about one of those 6.
Okay, right.
So just to recap, restate, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey was one of them for me. So after watching Excellent Adventure, which was a tight 90, by the way.
Yeah, loved it.
Excellent Adventure's a tight 90, and so is Bogus Journey. So I got both films done in under 3 hours because I immediately pressed play on the second one.
Nice.
And yeah, Bogus Journey is a film that they had, I think, over triple the budget of what Excellent Adventure had.
Can you really tell?
Yeah, you can. And it's directed by a different person, and so it's got stylistic differences as well. Something we didn't touch about with Excellent Adventure is that even though it was released in 89, it was kind of in the can early 88. So the time gap, even though the release dates are only 2 years apart, It's more like 3 or 4 years apart.
Okay, right.
In terms of production. So you do notice it a bit, like that they really were able to improve production for Bogus Journey. I had fun watching Excellent Adventure, but I had way more fun watching Bogus Journey.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a film that I can recite line for line. So if anyone's already gone on the Excellent Adventure, I also recommend you go on the Bogus Journey.
Yeah, nice.
Yep.
Forget 90 minutes. My first one is a mere 30 minutes. ADBC.
Fun.
So you're very familiar with this, but for those who don't know, which will probably be all of our listeners, it is a Matt Berry, Richard Ayoade, Julian Barrett musical parody of The Nativity set from the perspective of the innkeeper. But for me, I mean, I'd seen this before. This was a rewatch. For me, the joy of this comes from not parodying The Nativity, but parodying things like Jesus Christ Superstar and the rock operas and having people randomly going up like several octaves and just like yelling straight down the camera lens. And they had characters who it wasn't their singing voice behind them, which brought a lot of comedy into it as well.
I really like the production value on this as well, where they really kind of nod to that 70s era of, like, we don't have a lot of money, so it's all very much staged. It's meant to replicate what would be on a theatrical stage in many ways, in terms of the sets that they use and stuff, and the costuming. But yeah, it's way fun.
Yeah, and they purposely write in jokes to show that the production isn't running smoothly. So there's one point where a character closes the door as someone exits, and then the door just slowly swings back open again, and they have to reclose it. But yeah, for me, the joy comes from noticing what each of the songs is supposed to be imitating from the original Jesus Christ Superstar soundtrack.
Yeah, see, I don't know Jesus Christ Superstar as well as you do. I do know it a little bit, but
I'm not sure I even picked this up the first time I watched it, but every song is actually representing one of the songs from Jesus Christ Superstar.
Very cool.
Why should you want to know? Don't you mind about the future?
That's called ADBC.
Both recommend that one for sure. I checked out the new David Fincher, which had a limited theatrical release. So we're talking The Killer, starring Michael Fassbender. But last week or so, it dropped to Netflix. So it's on the streaming services. I'm a big Fincher fan. I think this is his 11th film, and half of his back catalogue are some of my favorites. We're talking Fight Club. We're talking Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, Seven. He's got some great films. So his most recent, though, prior to this, Mank, was probably his biggest flop. Actually, that's not true, because Alien 3 is his biggest flop. Mank was a bit of a dud for many.
Bit manky.
Yeah, a bit manky. Whereas this one is quite a return to form for him. I had a lot of fun with it. Talking to Javier about it, I saw it a bit more fondly than he did. He liked it as well, but I think I was in the right mood for this film as well. And it's his best looking film, I think. It's still very much a Fincher look, which is like he loves making his films look quite cold. They just stepped it up with the cinematography on this one. So yeah, I don't want to say too much. It's somewhat simple story, which I liked as well. We've talked over quite a few podcasts now about how being concise with a story and just like focusing on the main thing and just going, we're just going to talk about that, sometimes works. Sometimes you want a complex story, but sometimes the concision within a storytelling, it's going to have more engagement occur because of it. So yeah, I really liked The Killer and do recommend.
Okay, cool. Next up for me, Bottoms, a 2023 film. You've obviously seen it. I had mixed feelings about it. I really enjoyed the two lead actors. So Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri.
Edebiri, yeah.
Edebiri?
Yeah. Who we know from The Bear.
Yes, well, also, she's the one that took over the voice acting role of Missy in Big Mouth.
Ah.
Yeah, so I believe she was a writer on the show, and then when they wanted to actually have a black actor portray Missy, she just threw her hat in the ring, and they were like, yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
But they were great. They were really good in it. The writing was a bit hit and miss for me. The absurd moments in the film were probably the bits that I engaged with the most, but I also just liked their really sharp wit back and forth between those two characters.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reliance on those two in the film. Like, the writing is well supported by those guys. And I agree with everything you're saying. I think there are some bits where it's a bit so-so in what the actual film had for you.
Yeah.
But those two really hold it up.
They're just very charismatic, and I've seen interviews with them as well, and it makes me think that I wouldn't be surprised if they'd improv'd a bunch as well on set. They're very fast.
Are you aware that they have worked together for years and years now? They had their own little show that they tried to get off the ground, where similar to what the Broad City couple did, where they made like a web series. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think they went to like drama school together and all that stuff. So,
okay, well, maybe I'll check out some of their back catalogue.
Yeah.
But I knew Rachel Sennett was in
Bodies.
Bodies,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So I can't really remember. I knew she was in it, but I can't really remember much about that film. I've only watched it the once.
There's one film before it, which is actually the director of Bottoms, and she's in it, called Shiver Baby, which I liked more than Bottoms.
Okay.
It's a very short film. It's only like 70 or 80 minutes, and it was based on a short film. But there's a claustrophobia to this particular film that is so well executed. I Shiver Baby, I do recommend. Bottoms, I recommend as well. It's fun. You got to admit that it's fun, yeah?
It is fun, yeah. So it's essentially about these two girls who start a high school fight club to meet girls, essentially.
Yep.
And as I said, it is fun.
Yeah, I like the satirical element of talking about high school and high school movies to it, like where they kind of go extreme on some of the tropes that you'd find in a high school movie.
The airhead jokes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. Next one for me was a rewatch, one that you and I both agree was a fantastic film that got released last year, Barbarian.
My goodness.
I would say it was definitely my top 10 films of last year. It's, if someone was to say to me, what's a recent horror that you recommend? I'd probably say this film first. Oh, maybe I'd say Talk to Me and then this film. But yeah.
That's a good double feature.
It really is, isn't it? Yeah. Barbarian, like with many of these kinds of films, you don't want to say too much, especially with this film. I think this film on the rewatch doesn't have as much going for it because the element of surprise in the story is quite important to how fun the first watch is. But I still loved going back to it. It was great. The use of the setting is really strong in this film. Again, I don't want to say too much. And then the twist of the story halfway through, blah, blah, blah. It stood up. It was really good. And the actors in it, the three main actors?
Yeah.
2 or 3. Yeah.
Don't say too much.
I'm really trying not to say too much. Anyway, go watch Barbarian, guys. It's really good.
It is very good.
Yeah.
Next up for me, this is a double feature, 21 and 22 Jump Street. So we mentioned there was a soundbite for 22 Jump Street, the slam poem.
Waving my hands a lot.
From Jonah Hill back in the Burbs podcast. And it just got me really geared up to watch it again. It's a very, very easy watch. Have you seen them?
I have, and these movies are the types of movies that on paper aren't really for Mr. Whittle, but they're very fun.
They are very, very fun.
Like, there's a lot of really funny dialogue in these films. Yeah. What did you say? They're easy watches.
They are. For a while, a third one was on the cards. They were going to do a mashup between Men in Black and 23 Jump Street. So it was going to be called MIB 23. Yeah, they've written the script for it and everything, but then these films sort of stopped being as popular. Not these particular films, but just R-rated comedy films.
They really did, didn't they? So when were these two released? Like,
I feel like it was 2014, maybe?
Yeah.
And obviously the directors too then started doing other works as well. So everyone just kind of drifted away from the project, but there has been talks recently that they might revive the idea again. It's one of those things where all the people that were involved are kind of interested, but just busy with other projects.
Yeah, so 22 Jump Street is nearly 10 years old now. And you're right, there has been a significant shift in what modern comedy is doing. Like, Bottoms is a good representation of films that are finding a way in with like new sensitivities and all this kind of stuff, but still presenting some kind of edge.
Or they could do that lazy thing that I was telling you about where you just add a slasher on top of an existing film idea.
Is that a segue into your next one?
Nah, that'll come in trailers.
Oh, that was trailers, that's right. Well, this is a good segue though, because my next film is Dix the Musical. This is one you're going to watch soon, yeah? Because I told you that I think you'll enjoy this. It's namely for it is a musical, so there's, I'd say a good 10 different songs in it.
Awesome.
It's not like they just throw a couple in there. It's not all songs like ADBC is, but, you know, it is certainly reliant on the music and the whole kind of classic musical vibe to tell their story. Well, the story itself is kind of simple and boring almost, but that doesn't matter because the way they tell it is crude. It's extremely crude humor. I mean, it's called Dix the Musical. What do you expect, right?
That's fair. That's fair.
But as I mentioned to you, the big coup is getting Nathan Lane and Megan Mullally to star in this film. They must be theatre royalty as well. But I know Nathan Lane is. Megan Mullally, I think, does a lot of theatre as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So they steal every scene. And what's great is the two protagonists who are also the writers of this film. This film is based on a stage play that they wrote, and so it used to be a two-person play that they've now adapted into this film. Whenever Nathan and Megan have a big scene or a song, they make way for them. They just exclude themselves from the scene or they step away. There's not a lot of we need to be the center of attention because they know what they've got with those two. And it works really well. Some particular Nathan Lane scenes that I'm very excited for you to watch. Dix the Musical, a lot of fun. I am not recommending it if you are underage, but it's a lot of fun.
You've put the disclaimer in. You're good.
Yep.
So for TV shows, I've got 3, but I will try and speed through it because I've also got a live show as well.
Ooh.
So first up, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, which you've also watched the first episode of.
Yeah, and we were actually talking about it on the way to recording this podcast. I had a lot of fun watching the first one. And
I really did.
You watched the whole thing, yeah?
I have.
Yeah.
So for fans of the film, the first episode basically is the start of the film beat for beat. And then right at the end of the first episode, a very different plot point occurs. And that kind of shifts the rest of the show on a different journey, which of course makes sense. You don't want to just be repeating the same thing over and over again. I love the movie. And when I say love, I mean it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Because of that, it's very hard to watch the show and not want to watch the film.
Yeah.
But I thought it was great. I thought it did really, really well. The animation style is great. Having all the returning actors is a very nice touch. And just, they take the show in some fun directions. There's some cool twists and turns.
Cool. No, I'll probably go home tonight and watch another episode of it. 2 more films for me, and these ones didn't quite hit the mark as much as some of the others I've mentioned. One of them being Corner Office, which is another film that came out this year, starring John Hamm. So he's always a bit of a draw card for me. I really like John. This film just didn't really hit it for me. I found myself bored, and these films that are kind of thematically trying to say something else, commonly I'll like them, but this one just didn't do it well. John Hamm is this office worker who starts at a new job. He finds this room, which is the corner office, the titular corner office.
That's good.
But no one else at the office that he works in can see the office. So and then it's about the mental state of John Hamm and all this stuff, and things kind of break down from there. So cool idea, just a bit boringly executed. So, yeah. Don't recommend Corner Office, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yep.
Next for me, another Walking Dead series, another spin-off, Daryl Dixon. So I think I probably enjoyed this more than Dead City, but it's all becoming a bit repetitive at this point. As I said to you last week or the week before, the one that I'm kind of hanging out for is The Ones That Lived. It's about Rick and Michonne, and basically just because I'm interested to get some answers that were left unresolved from the show. But in terms of these plot lines, they're all a bit formulaic now. So couple of new additions to the show, but nothing really that we hadn't seen before.
This Daryl kind of spin-off, I guess, is what you call it. Is it a limited series? Or they only doing one season of it?
There might have only been 6 episodes, maybe.
Okay, right.
Only doing one season. No, I think it's just been renewed for a second season.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
so must have had a bit of fanfare.
Yeah. And look, I watched it, and I'll probably end up watching season 2 as well. But yeah, just it wasn't breaking any new ground.
Right. Final film for me is 7 Psychopaths.
Yes.
So Martin McDonagh, the Irish director who did In Bruges, he did 3 Billboards Outside That Place in Missouri, and he also did last year's Banshees of Inisherin, which made my top 10 along with Barbarian. This was one that I'd seen once before, didn't really enjoy it at the time, wanted to go back now that I've got a bit more of an appreciation for the rest of his catalogue. I'd put it as my lowest out of his 5 films now. I found the storyline to be a bit muddled.
Okay.
I saw what he was going for. None of it was confusing per se. It just led to a level of disengagement for me. Like, I just didn't do it.
I can totally understand that. I like this movie, but I can see what you're saying there for sure.
Yeah. Sam Rockwell's fantastic in it. So is Colin Farrell and Christopher Walken. Like, you know, the whole cast is superb. Because, like, Woody Harrelson's in there.
Yeah.
We talked about a couple of people making small appearances as well. It's a really strong cast. The film itself is just, it was so-so for me. So that's Seven Psychopaths.
Cool. 2 more for me. The first is kind of a TV show. It's a comedy special. So I revisited Middleditch and Schwartz.
I'm going to revisit it. Like, it came up on my Netflix recommends again last night when I was watching something else. And then, I'm like, I have to rewatch that.
Oopsie, whoopsies.
I mean, watching The After Party was what did it for me. I was like, I gotta watch more Ben Schwartz.
Yeah.
I watched a bunch of, the early show, the comedy show that he did. Oh, I can't remember who he does it with, but it's on YouTube. All the episodes are on YouTube.
I don't know that one.
And it's just like a fake Comedy Central morning show, and the outtakes for it are so much longer than the show itself, because I reckon they put the two of them in front of a camera and just say, go.
Right.
But if you're
is
looking
it both of them in it as well?
No.
Oh.
So it's Ben Schwartz. Although Thomas Middleditch does appear, each episode has someone that they're interviewing, so he does appear as himself in it.
Yeah.
But if you're looking it up, tell me what who he's playing opposite, because she's awesome. She's really good. I've just forgotten her name.
I know him as Jean Ralphio in Parks and Rec.
Of course.
That's probably his most famous character, right?
But this is a very, very easy watch.
It's called The Early Show?
Or maybe The Earliest Show.
Oh, Lauren Lapkus. I love Lauren Lapkus.
That's it.
Yeah.
So
I did not know about this show at all.
They both, it literally looks like they step out in front of the camera and just go.
Yeah.
They're just riffing off each other, and it's so silly. I think you'd adore it.
Well, Lauren Lapkus goes on the Comedy Bang Bang. Have you ever listened to the Comedy Bang Bang podcast?
No, I can't say that I have.
That's an improv comedy audio-only podcast.
Okay, right.
Maybe Ben Schwartz is on there on occasion as well, but Lauren Lapkus does it quite a bit. And so she's got really good improv chops as well. So that checks out what you were saying.
But yes, we've digressed quite a bit. Middleditch and Schwartz is just 3 comedy specials that are completely improvised based on a prompt from the audience.
Watch this. Anything could happen. Oh! Pizza? See? Did we plan it? No. Watch out. Chop.
You chopped my pizza in half.
I am no stranger to improv comedy, obviously with Mads dipping her toe in the world of improv and, well, more than dipping her toe, splashing around in the deep
whole leg.
Yeah. But these guys are on another level. And I think part of what I really appreciate about it is they both have very different styles in terms of Thomas Middleditch is a real stickler for making sure that he remembers all of the details so that he can kind of tie up all the loose ends. And Ben Schwartz is very much, let's just have fun and forget about it.
So Middleditch will commonly correct Schwartz?
Yeah.
But in an indirect way?
And as an audience member too, you retain all of the information as well. And it's funny because they're working so hard to play all of these roles and remember all the information. They often do get things muddled up, but the mistakes are my favorite parts when they get all confused or even break character and just laugh at each other.
There's only 3 of these, isn't there?
There are. They were supposed to be doing another season, but lately there's been a bit of...
the strikes impacting production on a bunch of stuff.
Yes, but I feel like I might have read an article that said it's been cancelled, so I certainly hope not. If these guys came out here and did some shows, I would definitely go, probably multiple times, because this is one of the most enjoyable things maybe I've ever watched.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why I revisited it on Friday. I was like, I need something fun. And that's exactly what it is.
I'm going to revisit it as well. Like that, it's a great one. Middleditch and Schwartz.
Really, really good.
And I see your Schwartz is as big as mine.
So the last thing I want to mention, in addition to movies and TV, I also went and saw a live show this week, La Cage aux Folles.
So when you told me you saw this, I didn't realize that you weren't referring to the late 70s movie. You went and saw
Oh, no, I saw the live show.
Sitting across from you now, this clarification is fresh news to me.
There you go.
Where'd you see it?
It was at the Art Centre.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was awesome. It was a gift to Maddie. Actually, after we did the podcast for the Birdcage, she was going on about how much she loved the Birdcage, and her birthday was coming up. So, yeah, I got her tickets to the French show that it's based on.
Yeah.
They obviously perform it in English, but French accents, and it's set in France. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was really, really good. It's hard. I mean, I hold the Birdcage right at the top of my all-time favorite comedies. So it's hard to compare that cast to a new cast, but it was a really fun show. And most impressive of all, the ensemble. Obviously, the group of men dressed as women for the duration of the show. Incredible dancers, but also just always in character and hilarious.
Yeah.
Really, really funny. The best comedic moments came from them ending a song, and then it would immediately snap to them being backstage. And so you'd see them like exhausted and like crawling away from the amount of dance moves they'd done, or like smoking a cigarette, fixing their junk. Very, very funny.
Yeah, right.
Really, really good.
Sounds great.
So that's all for me.
Very good.
Shall we move on to Tantalising Trailers?
Jeez.
Trailers. Tantalizing films. Trailers. Don't know if we will be a fan. How will it be? We'll know in time.
You're a bit light on this week.
I am, because I was trying to work out, like, because I usually have like 2 or 3 always on the go, but I feel like they've thoroughly announced what's coming into the Christmas season in terms of films that are coming out. And so now it's just waiting for those films to land. Like, so there's a bit of a lack for me this week. I've got 2, but nothing that's, of significant note. How many you got?
I got 4.
You got 4.
So I'll kick things off then. The first one was they're coming out with a new animated Garfield movie.
Oh, sorry, I did watch this, but I refuse to even talk about it.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, first of all, it's an animated film, so to you, it's not a film at all. But how many animated characters can Chris Pratt possibly play?
Well, how many are they going to pay him for? I guess?
So he's Super Mario, he's the Lego movie. There's another, I'm sure there's a third one before this as well. Yeah, he's really monopolizing the central animated characters. The most engaging part of this trailer for me was the opening where Garfield is younger and doesn't talk. Like, the smart alecky Garfield is one we've seen time and time again. I mean, Bill Murray played Garfield.
Yep.
He regrets it, but he did.
Well, I love that story where he thought it was a Coen brother that was making it. That it was Joel Coen, or Ethan Coen, but it's a different Coen.
It's pretty funny. And then in Zombieland, when he gets shot, they're like, any regrets? No, Garfield maybe. But yeah, so I engaged most with the start of this because it was like a sad, Garfield's out on the street and he's like a little kitten. I engage more with that. Cute animated characters you're like, I'm out.
I got halfway through this and like, I don't even think this one's going to try and do that thing where it caters to all audience types. I felt like it's just going to be a kid's film. Like the way the preview presented what the energy and the narrative's going to be, it just felt like it's just going to be for kids. There's not going to be any kind of those adult jokes.
Yeah, I don't know.
I could be wrong, but that's the feeling.
Well, you'll never know because you'll never watch it.
You could tell me, but yeah.
I don't know if I'll watch it either. Yeah. Anyway, that's Garfield. Yeah. Glowing review from us.
I just when I looked at my list, I'm like, one of them is one that we talked about last podcast. So
what's that?
The Fall Guy.
Yeah.
So the Ryan Gosling one. I love Ryan Gosling. This trailer didn't really appeal to me.
You're gonna break Ethan's heart.
Why?
Because he loves Ryan Gosling. He thinks he is Ryan Gosling, as well as Leo DiCaprio's character from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I love Ryan Gosling as well. He's been in a bunch of great films. So maybe I could be proven wrong with this film, and it is great, but like the trailer didn't really do much for me. Outside of it being filmed in Australia, like the Australian backdrop of he's doing stunts with the Sydney Harbour Bridge behind him and stuff like that. Yeah.
I think it looks fun. For me, next up, this is kind of something that is quite personal to me because this was one of my favorite shows growing up. So when it was on TV, I never missed an episode. If I was out and it was on, I had to set up an elaborate VCR system where it was taping the show while I was gone.
And that show is A Current Affair.
It is not A Current Affair. It was Monk. So with Tony Shalhoub, the one that often Scrubs would make fun of because it used to win all of the awards for Tony Shalhoub's performance.
Ah, okay.
And so in Scrubs, it'd be like, they'd make a reference to them winning the best award, and then JD would be like, take that, Tony Shalhoub. He is coming out of retirement for one last case. So they're making a movie. I think it's probably pretty similar to what they did with Psych, capitalizing on the success of that movie. But yeah, the characters reunited once since the TV ended, and that was during COVID. They did a short little sketch where they were all Zooming with each other, and Monk was talking about, because he's a germaphobe, he was talking about being right about everything that was going on in relation to COVID. So I'm excited for this. I adore the show, and it had a very, very satisfying ending. But I also think it's the kind of thing that just a one-off kind of film would work nicely. And based on the title, the fact that it's called His Last Case, it suggests that this isn't going to be a yearly thing that they do, which is kind of what they were doing for Psych for a while.
Oh, okay.
I'm excited for it. It should be fun.
The only trailer that is fresh is the documentary for Albert Brooks, related to Mel Brooks. I don't know if they're brothers though. I think they're cousins. The documentary is called Albert Brooks Defending My Life. Albert Brooks as a comedian is hilarious, but I also think he's a fantastic filmmaker. He just has a certain energy and charm to his films. He's well known more for his cameos in films rather than his features, but his features are gems if you go out looking for great comedic writing. So I really recommend his films. And you know how they always have those talking heads? Whenever there's a documentary which is like an ode or a tribute to someone, it's about who they're going to have talk about that person. Mm-hmm. Like there was a lot of big names that are really going to be on this documentary singing accolades for Albert Brooks. So yeah, I'm excited to watch it because I really get into the history of comedy, and he's an important part of it. So that's Albert Brooks Defending My Life.
Okay, cool. Two more for me. I'll speed through them since you're fading fast. Madam Web was the first one, new Marvel film. It's got Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, Adam Scott. I think for me, like I am starting to lose enthusiasm for superhero projects, but this cast is probably what will get me along to see this. A strong cast. Looks like a bit of fun. It's got some new takes. They're doing some time manipulation-y stuff. I think the whole point of Madam Web is she can kind of see the webs of what could potentially happen in different futures. Mm-hmm. She sees the future and then can stop it and see it a million times over depending on the way that things play out. I thought this was one of the more interesting trailers for Marvel films that's come out recently, so I might go along to see this one. That's Madam Web. And the last one is what we were talking about before, about taking an existing film idea and then just slapping a slasher into the mix. And this is called It's a Wonderful Knife. I mean, the pun for the title is good. And as I said to you when I was talking about Totally Killer, when I was talking about Happy Death Day, when I was talking about Freaky, they're all ideas that on paper I should really like. Comedy elements, parody elements, and slasher elements. And they've just fallen flat for me lately. I'm hoping this one's different. It's got Justin Long in it, which is a big draw card. He's got some weird false teeth in it. But I think it's supposed to make him look... He's playing like the mayor, but I think he's also the killer in the film, so it's supposed to make him look more sinister by having that overpronounced smile.
Right.
I really like Justin Long, so hopefully that will help increase my enjoyment for it. I mean, he's in Barbarian.
He's in Barbarian, and he's great in Barbarian. So, yeah.
Cool. So that's all from us today, guys. As always, I do remind you to like, subscribe, share it around, comment, all that business. And in the words of the great Abraham Lincoln, be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.